Welcome back to the Butterfly Season podcast. I am so excited to have this very special guest on today. She is a best-selling author, top podcast host with over 1 million downloads, community leader, community builder, the queen of You're Not Meant to Do Business or Life Alone, my dearest and greatest friend, Lindsey Schwartz. Okay, so you guys, this is like a behind the scenes bestie moment right now. I have literally one of my best friends on the podcast, and I feel like you're going to feel like you're here sitting having a conversation with us because literally like that is our relationship. And she has poured so much into my life on so many levels of just like personal and business and just like, and also has increased my funny, I would say.
I feel the same about you.
Well, that's good. You guys, Lindsey, like literally, does she need an intro? Probably not. But I'm just so happy to have you on my podcast this time. Like, what is life?
What is life? It's perfect. It's the podcast we've all been waiting for. So thank you.
So I want to jump right into it. And you guys, Lindsey had a mastermind, which she's no longer doing anymore because she has something even special coming that I want to share with you guys. But at this mastermind that I got the privilege of being in, she said the importance of like making your purgatory pretty. And for me, I'm just like, this podcast is about transition and butterfly season and all of the things, but really like the power and the transformation. And oftentimes, and not to be fake, but oftentimes like our transition or purgatory or like just that like lull moment before you're figuring out like what your next thing is or the next phase of your life, like it feels really ugly. And when you mention that, in addition to like being self-affirming and the importance of it, I was just like, that is so mind-blowing to me because I feel like my purgatory or my transition or my cocoon season, like at home, that shit looked ugly. So I want to chat with you about like the importance of self-affirming and just making purgatory pretty.
And not to be confused with faking that it's pretty or, putting on that front, like everything's fine, because we've definitely have those moments with each other where we're just in it. And it doesn't mean that it's pretty all the time, but I think that we've both learned some really powerful tools to make it less sucky.
Yes.
Just to make it suck less.
Yes, literally to make it suck less or feel like less sucky. Like when you had mentioned that and you mentioned the importance of self-affirming, all of my friends, probably except for you and like really some of my entrepreneur friends, but everyone else has a baby, right? And like they all have children or are pregnant or all the things. So like my conversations with friends is a lot of me learning about all of this stuff. And like some of the things that my friends' children are going through is like learning how to self-soothe and the importance of it. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, why is it important to self-soothe? And they're like, oh, because if your child doesn't learn to self-soothe, then maybe when they're older, they might not learn how to handle stress. And so when you said it's important to self-affirm, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, because if you don't have people enrolled in your ideas, like you have to be the advocate for yourself to like continue to push forward.
Right. Yeah. There's been so many times I feel like as the ideas get bigger that I realize I'm getting a glimpse ahead of everyone else. That if I'm looking for someone else to validate that this next business I want to start, this next program I want to launch, there are seasons where getting validation is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. But to realize that if no one else has caught up yet to what you can see, they might need to see proof before they're on board, before they co-sign this idea.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize until I got into entrepreneurship how much I made a lot of my life decisions based on getting validation from other people. And that looked a lot of different ways. Like this silent question of, is this going to disappoint anyone if I do this thing? Or if I go after this thing, is it going to disappoint someone? Is it going to hurt someone or make them feel less than? So sometimes the validation came in that way. Like, is everyone else in my life on board with this? Oh no, one person who's never happy about anything. Let me just go ahead and sit here and try to make you happy before I ever do the things that I want to do, which I think is just kind of like a one of the silent ways of sabotaging things we want to do. Or it's, maybe I would have like this really big idea and then go and ask people that I really respect. And this goes even for like your mentors. Sometimes your mentors can't see what you can see, and people are only going to give you their advice based on what they know, their life experiences, and they may not have the experiences necessary to see the same vision that you can see. So I really had to learn this. And you're so right. It literally is like a toddler learning how to self-soothe, but learning how to find that belief and nurture it within yourself before anyone else can see it.
What did that look like for you specifically? Could you share about like a business idea or a season in your life that maybe people couldn't see the vision, and what were the things that you had to tell yourself? Did you make a routine out of it? Like, what was that like for you?
Okay, this is the example that pops into my mind where it's just the most vivid. I think when my book had come out and I was planning the first event where I had never done an event, people didn't know me for doing events. I had no photos, no videos, nothing to show what this event was like. So it was more of like a, trust me, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
It was really being sold. The tickets for this event were being sold on this vision. And I think because this whole part of my journey was such a stretch for me personally, it was the first time finishing my book was the first thing I'd ever done where I went after something that really stretched me in a significant way. And on the heels of that, I had grown some confidence to really start to trust my own intuition and trust, what I now see, now that you and I are deep in the rabbit hole of human design, being a generator. When I light up about something, I can just see it. I can feel it. I can see it. And I can move forward toward that vision. And I was getting those early hits of that superpower within me. But I think what really worked well is I was authentic and vulnerable with people about the parts that didn't feel so sure. I wasn't approaching it from like a fake it till I make it. I can never show that I'm scared. I actually just brought that into the story because that was part of what I was trying to help others transform through. And I think that really helped me. Number one, allowing myself, like giving myself permission to speak out loud the fears, because I think when we speak them out loud, they have less of a grip than if we're trying to pretend that they're not there. And then I had this little hint of a question. I don't know if this will help anyone else, but I think when we're looking for that validation, when we're in a season where self-affirmation is really necessary, we're at this crossroads where we don't really know. We don't know if it's going to work out. And that can feel really scary. But I kept defaulting to, okay, well, if I quit now, I already know what that version of the story looks like. I had quit on other big ideas. I had chosen the safe route before. So I really helped myself move forward. And this will tie into self-affirmation. I first just had to get curious, like, what's the best thing that could happen? Because we're so good at focusing on like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I just started to ask, like, what's the best thing that could happen? What cool blessing could be waiting on the other side of me actually doing this thing, instead of asking myself the question of like, what if no one shows up, or all those like the things that are just as easy to focus attention on. So it went from that, authenticity to curiosity to really, I think the final step was like really attaching it to a vision. What was the impact that I wanted to make? And I think especially when something that you're moving toward has an attachment to helping other people other than yourself, that was what really helped me move through like the most uncomfortable parts of it. And so if I knew that my heart was in the right place and I knew that, I was excited about this vision, and then when I would share it and even one person would get excited about it, that really fueled me. And I can't describe it other than I just had this trust that there was something on the other side of making this commitment, going forward toward this idea. And I really let go of the attachment of what that outcome was. how many people would show up, if I would fall on my face or make a fool of myself speaking on stage. I just kind
Yeah.
of like let all that go and focused more on the impact I wanted to make, the fact that I was probably going to grow in the process. And then, I can't say that I even had a lot of self-affirmation. It was more of like let's see. Let's really see if this works out. But that I think is important to talk about, that maybe that's how it starts.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about that is that with like the authenticity and the curiosity, you end up reframing the story instead of fear, but more like opportunity, right? Like
Mhm.
being authentic, not a lot of people are. And I don't think that people realize that the more authentic you are, the more people gravitate towards you, because just like you say, like you're really not meant to do life or business alone, but also like people who are dealing with it gravitate towards you, and your stuff just ends up doing a lot better because people are like, wow, this person's a human being and they're just like me. And like, I really feel this. But I think whenever we're like on the cusp of something or trying something new, or for you, the book launch, getting into that and reframing like the fear around it, like what if people don't show up, but then also like what if people do, you kind of paint a more beautiful picture that gets you excited about it and less like in the dumps, and more positive, and things just start to flow in the way that it's meant to flow towards you. Attracted, energy, all of the like Joe Dispenza woo that we're in,
That
also
we're
that rabbit
also in that
hole.
rabbit hole.
I
We have one foot in the human design rabbit hole, one foot in the Joe Dispenza rabbit hole.
We're
Yeah.
straddling in a rated G version
I know.
two
I'm like,
rabbit
this
holes
just
right now.
took a turn. It's just, do not let our husbands hear this podcast. I wanted to say something too about the authenticity piece, because here is I think the slippery slope. And I see this happen a lot, because the authenticity can sometimes be masked by, or it can be a mask for a desire for people to affirm you. So not to say that when you're authentic, you're
Right.
looking for someone to say, oh, you're not an imposter, you're totally gonna, do great. That's not what I'm saying, that like you're intentionally doing that, but just notice where I'll still catch myself. Like I'll downplay something, or I'll be like, yeah, I'm not really sure how this is going to work out. And deep down, I think I'm hoping someone will remind me, oh, you're amazing. You make such a difference. Like there's that little part of my ego that's like, just
Yeah.
like, could
Tell
you
me
just
how
like
good I
say a few nice words? That would really be great right now. And so I think just like being honest, where where the authenticity line can sometimes become this story that it feels safe to be in, this like the insecurity part of it, where if true self-affirmation, if true growth and evolution and your butterfly season is happening, you do actually get to this point where you're like, no, I got this.
Yeah.
And that's not prideful. That's not you being boastful or anything that I think is so easy to attach to that. It's okay to like develop that confidence in yourself to say, no matter what, I've got this, because I know I'm going to create something out of it. And I think that's the season that I'm in now. Not that I don't have fear or doubt or insecurity. I'm definitely taking on new things that are bringing up some of those old feelings. But now I've got it's like a rap sheet, but for my wins.
Yeah.
And so I have a lot more evidence to be able to, and how that self-affirmation looks now is to say, hey, remember when you felt this way, and then here's what happened on the other side. Or remember how much you wanted to give up in this season, and then you pushed through, and how you felt about yourself. So affirmation isn't just like pumping myself up with these like niceties. It's also reminding myself of the truth of the other seasons where I have pushed through and accomplished something great.
Yeah, that is super powerful. You know what it reminds me of? When we were in I think we were in the car in North Carolina for a speaking engagement, and I was talking about my first time talking about butterfly season, and I don't even think I had titled it that yet, but I was pulling up notes in my phone, and I found like a prayer list, and a specific like answered prayer list that I had just made. And like one of them was like to find a unicorn of an employee, which was Hannah, that we were praying for her before she even came. But what it reminds me of is like having, even if it's to write down the proof of every time that you started anew or had a vision or a goal or anything, whether that's personal life or business or otherwise, having that proof, like Lindsey says, is your rap sheet to say, hey, these are all of the times that I've like overcome. These are all of the things that I've done. Like I can also do this too.
Yeah. Yeah. And, whether you write that down or whether it's just something that you kind of commit to memory, it is super powerful because as you're on this journey of evolution, like I said, and we can both attest to this, it's not like the fear goes away. It's not like you never doubt yourself because you're constantly stepping into new cocoons and growing new wings. And I'm definitely being reminded of that right now, where I realize how much the best things in my life have all come on the other side of a season of being really uncomfortable or really restless. And when you have the proof that being in that season has led you somewhere beautiful before, I think you resist it a lot less. And therefore, I think you stay in the season of ick a lot for a shorter duration of time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And there's a little bit of like the fear, I think really, I feel like where the fears came from, at least for me, was mostly the unknown, and me being resistant to the unknown manifested itself in fear. What are some things with respect to authenticity, because you talked about that like as being like the first piece. We talked about it on the front end in terms of, or on the back end really, in terms of like, hey, not doing it for validation. But what about when like you are in the thick of mess, like in the thick of the most chaotic time for you, when you know there's a transition and it's super painful, tears involved, all of the things, like what might be, I don't know, a measure or rubric or anything that you would say to help measure like, how shareable is this? Like, how vulnerable do I get to be authentic? And what does that look like? I've always struggled with that in my most like cocoon time. Like, there was a handful of people that knew what was going on. And I just didn't really know how to be authentic, right? Because like you have a personality, you have a persona, you have following, you have people who know who you are, who you were. And I feel like that might be hard for some people to be authentic, but then you see other people showing up really well authentically. Like, is there a balance? What do you think?
It's such a good question. And I do not claim to have the answer for everybody, but I'll share what has felt authentic to me is I honor that for most of a season where I'm really going through it, I do prefer to process that alone or with 1 to 2 really close friends. And I'll share my reasoning behind it. And again, this isn't to say I don't ever want someone to look at my life and think that it's perfect, I never struggle. But I also don't owe it to anyone to share all of my battles as I'm going through them. Because what that has felt like to me is opening myself up to too many opinions about, and well-meaning opinions about how to move through or how I should operate, where I'm not ready for it. I actually really deeply trust my own intuition, and I have a really, really strong connection with God. And I feel like that is where I get the answers that are right for me. Yeah. So the moment that I start to open myself up to sharing something when I'm still in it, it actually, and I don't know if this too is like just being an empath, but it feels like way too much energy where I'm conserving my energy to address whatever needs to be addressed in that season. Yeah. So I don't feel like that's inauthentic at all. In fact, I even think just the analogy of the butterfly, right? The butterfly, the caterpillar goes into the cocoon. It's not a transparent cocoon where it's like this show where we're seeing every moment of the butterfly soup that happens in between. That's a cocoon. That's a season where you are sort of like out of the limelight, if you will. Right. And things are being reorganized in you to emerge as the next version of yourself. That's very much how it feels for me. And I don't necessarily think that I've heard the analogy that you should share like traumas or pain from a place where it's a scar, not a scab, when there's been time for healing. I don't know that that's always true. Because like you said, I follow plenty of people who do share more raw emotions as they're going through them. And I have no problem with that. I think it is just super individual.
Yeah, I do. I totally agree with that, because I've seen people show up super authentic in the moment and I'm like, wow. And then I've seen people retroactively do it. And then I've seen people do it also in the moment and then retract. Like, I was in the heat of the moment. There was a lot of emotions involved, and I regret actually showing
Yeah.
up online in this way. So,
My
and
bad.
it's really just, I know. And then it's just like a spectator sport. Like, I'm just like every day refreshing just to follow along on what's going on, not engaging or
Yeah.
anything. And I'm just like, I'm here for the show. So,
Oh, could be effective. Could be effective if that's the goal. You're trying to get a reality show, you're trying to be the next Kardashians, then
right?
go
There
for
you
it,
go.
you know?
There you go. Yeah. So I do want to thank you. I'm super grateful for how you held space for me in my cocoon season. It was a really long time, and you pushed me like to take action around just being in a cocoon season for too long. Because I mean, look, like, I always joke about it in that, like, cocoon season, I feel like, yeah, it sounds comfortable. Like, who wouldn't just want to like hibernate for a little while? Like, I'm a
Sounds kinda nice.
projector. Projectors are sleepy, right? Like, it's fine. But I do think that there is an expiration date, and like you mentioned, like, you can shorten the amount of time that you're in like the ugly of a transition by just kind of affirming yourself, showing yourself the proof of the times that you have gone out of an ugly season. What would be, maybe this might be a good question. What was it in the conversation that you and I had? And to give a little bit of context, Lindsey and I were at lunch, and I was in the thick of cocoon season, and I was talking to her about a few things that I wanted to launch. And one of them was Whxte, my fine jewelry line. And I was like, yeah, I think this was like in January or February. And I was like, probably January. And I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe I will launch like in November. Here's how it went. You were like, what are you up to? And I'm like, oh, I think I want to start a jewelry line. And you're like, oh, cool. Like, when? And like, when do you want to launch? And I'm like, I don't know, November. This is January, you guys. Like, and you're like, oh, okay. I don't know what the follow-up question was, but I was like, oh, okay, I know. Like, I need to get my shit together. So here's a question. What was it, if you remember, that you saw in me in that conversation that like pinged you to say, hey, like, it's time to like get moving? Like, how can you spot that in yourself? Because I think when you are in a cocoon season or when you're in transition, like, the shit is chaotic. Like, I don't know right from left, up from down, like what to take action on or not. There's so many emotions involved. Like, what did you see maybe that I couldn't see in myself or in anybody that you're like, hey, come on, like, slap in the butt. Let's get a move on.
I've often said that I'm not the friend to share your crazy wild dreams with unless you want some very pointed questions that are going to get you moving forward. So a word just of caution if anyone wants to be my friend.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So when I think of you specifically and that conversation specifically, I do think a gift that I have is to be able to see someone as their highest self, even in the midst of whatever mess they may feel like they're in. And I think it's kind of this tricky place because on one hand, I can see how one of my toxic traits could definitely be to just want to get into action, not feel anything that I need to feel, and action and do and prove my way to the other side of that cocoon season. And I think it just takes a really deep self-awareness to know if this is you observing you. Are you doing that? Or I think what I could feel in our conversations and from the others that we had, I knew that you were not skirting around looking at, your level of personal responsibility in the situation, looking at what you could control, what you couldn't control. So it would have been different if we were sitting in that conversation, you were sharing that idea and wanting that to be your ticket out. Then I probably would have said, no, come back in here and sit for a while. Let's just make sure that it's like the cocoon has a purpose.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you let the cocoon serve its purpose before you try to bust out of it.
Yeah.
And I do believe that, like, if we can be really radically honest with ourselves about whether we've learned the lesson that the cocoon was teaching us in the first place.
Yeah.
Then on the other side of it, we can be just as honest about whether there's some fear, some lingering fear about whatever sent us into the cocoon in the first place and like not wanting to have that happen again. So having friends around you who can more objectively, wait, is it objective or subjective? Like they're not
Objective.
as like attached to
Yeah.
the drama that we add to our own
Yeah.
story, and righteously so, right? You
Yeah.
had a lot of emotional attachment to the season that you were in. And I
Yeah.
sort of did too, like as like that I kind of wanted to fight for you. But I could also step back and just objectively look, wait, we said objective, right?
Yeah.
Someone give us a grammar lesson here. And I could say, well, what would it look like to push yourself? Also knowing you, knowing your personality, knowing how you show up when you are faced with a challenge that really stretches you. So it's so individual, but I think the question, if we're putting this back on the listeners and just having you really self-evaluate, are you wanting to rush your way out of the cocoon by action? And maybe you need to sit down and feel some things so that they don't come back around, right? You don't want to be back in the same cocoon living like Groundhog Day, but the butterfly version.
Because it will come back.
Because it'll happen,
stronger.
right? Exactly. Or have you dealt with what you need to deal with, and instead what's going to move you forward is to focus on the next thing that you can control. And sometimes it's not much, but there's always something you can control. You can choose to take control of, even in a situation where a lot of it isn't up to you.
Yeah. And I want to highlight on the importance of having somebody that is objective that can call you up, because I think that we're so conditioned to, especially like from a people pleaser standpoint or not wanting to rock the feather standpoint, and not that you have to, but having somebody that's like, hey, like, I love you, you can do better. Right? Like, literally, like that conversation was probably one of the dominoes that got me to like, okay, come on, it's time to pack up. We're not here for long. So I want to thank you for that, because it's been, I mean, like it was literally transformational for me. I was like, I remember getting in the car and being like, okay, been here for a while.
Why did I go to lunch with Lindsey? And how cool it was. I don't think either of us realize what a beautiful butterfly effect, look at me using that terminology, it would create, that you not only launched earlier than planned, but you had your very first pop-up at the Powerhouse Women event, which was just such a full circle moment. And, you know, I think it just speaks to the bigger message that I know we both talk a lot about, which is finding those people who you can really travel this journey with, because we can't, as much as I do believe I am super self-aware, I come to conclusions a lot faster when my patterns, my, even just like my greatness is mirrored back to me by other people. It's actually something I'm really in tune with right now, where I'm getting ready to step into the next season that's really going to stretch me, which will involve another book. I sense that some other bigger things are coming that it just feels like I'm stepping into this big void. So it's a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty. And I know that my default way of operating is to sell myself short. So even just looking at, okay, well, how can I support myself? Yes, by, you know, continuing to use these tools that I have to self-affirm, but also to make sure that I'm surrounded by a really solid group of people who are gonna call me up to that next level. And I'm putting together the squad right now. I'm it's like choosing my dodgeball team. Yep,
dodgeball team.
Just picking them very selectively.
Yeah. I mean, that's important. Your team is important. Like, they literally make you, like, being around you, being around my friends, like, you guys make me run faster. Like, just in life, personal, business, all of it. You talked about some things that you were stepping into, some exciting things that you have in the works. Can you share a little bit about some of those things?
Yeah, so the ones that I can see right now, which that's kind of how this journey has unfolded for me, is I'll only get a glimpse of what's coming in the next 6 months. Everything beyond that is a little bit more fuzzy. So I do know that I'm being called to create space, because there's something bigger. Hannah and I, my business partner, were just talking about this yesterday, We don't know what it is, but we can feel
Mm-hmm.
it. And we felt the call to clear massive space for something for a while.
Mm-hmm.
No clue what that is. And someone who really
Yeah.
likes to control things, I'm like, are you sure we should just be like taking things off of our plate? Because I like to be busy.
Right.
So we aren't doing our year-long mastermind next year. You had already mentioned that. But there's something that I've always wanted to teach. And it's really the framework for how I've scaled and grown the Powerhouse women community, like really grown a brand that thrives and is profitable because of community. It doesn't really
Right.
matter, what kind of business it is. I do think that business is changing and Facebook ads are changing. The algorithm is always changing. And so back to the things that we can control, I think that one of the things that all businesses really need to be focused on is building an engaged community. And we're going to teach that this year. We're doing it in kind of like a condensed mastermind format. That's the word I'm looking
Format.
for. Just to really start people's year off powerfully. And I don't know that we'll
Yeah.
ever do it again. Again, I kind of feel
Yeah.
like this is my swan song. I'm like full of all these analogies today. I don't know what's going on. I really want to empower the next generation of people who want to build powerful communities, because I get the sense that I'm going somewhere else. Not that I will, don't everyone freak out on me. This doesn't mean the Powerhouse Women community is going anywhere.
This is your farewell tour.
Yeah, I do. You heard it here first. This is going to be like our Gary Vee moment to come back and say, she called it. I can't explain it. I just get the feeling that I'm being called into the next evolution of this.
Yeah.
And in order for me to feel okay making that leap, whatever it is, I need to know that there's people who are going to carry out this mission, that like real community is going to be alive and well, and people will have a place where they know they belong, whether that's in the Powerhouse Women community, in the community you're building. It doesn't matter where. So we're teaching that, and then clearing space. The next thing I know for sure that's happening is my second book. So I'm really starting to, explore that and the different publishing options and all of the things. And I haven't been this uncomfortable or felt this much resistance since I wrote that first book it'll be almost 6 years ago. So I know something really cool is coming on the other side.
Yeah. I'm like so excited. I do want you to share a little bit about the power of, if you can humble brag, the power of your community, like how it's been underestimated, like, and just how you guys have shown up in much larger numbers and larger ways than people would have imagined, and kind of how you poured into your community. Because I think that you might be able to tell on the outside looking in, but my first interaction with Powerhouse, you had invited me to, we worked together, but I wasn't like in the community at all. But you invited me to be a part of this community. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been in communities before. I've spoken on stages before. I've done all of the things that I've done with Powerhouse. But the difference is the instant, without a question, buy-in in who you are once you're involved in the community. I really don't even know how to explain it. And maybe you have better words for it. Because that's like my like consumer feeling when I'm in the community, but it's like, it's really unmatched. And I'm not saying that to stroke your ego because you're my greatest friend, but like literally it's unmatched.
And it took a while to actually, sit down and kind of almost like piece together, well, what specifically did we do that other people could emulate? Because I think if people aren't careful, they could look at and say, there is a lot of my personality where this has come pretty intuitively, that the different things we've done, even how I show up and how I engage with the community, it's kind of just an extension of who I am and what is authentic to me. But I also knew that there had to be something more tangible that could be taught and that people could apply their own unique personality to, because I don't believe that it's anything all that complicated, but it's doing these minor things and obsessing over the things that everyone else would overlook. Everyone else would be like, oh, that's just like a waste of my time. There's no ROI on that. I have maximized all of those things from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I'll give you some like specific examples. I think, so often people hear community and they kind of use audience and community interchangeably. And I think the two are very different. And for those of you listening, if anyone does have a business, you need to have an audience to grow your business, but there's a layer deeper that people often overlook. And this is really what we've mastered, because I've always looked at it through this lens. Instead of just asking, how do I get more people to connect with me or my brand, which is really what I'm asking when I'm building my audience, nothing wrong with that. I've always taken it a layer deeper and said, how do I get those people to connect with each other? How do we create this sense of, it's beyond engagement, it's beyond the things that people want to be able to measure. And really what you're getting at is it's intangible. It's something that people can't really even explain. They can't really put their finger on, but they feel it.
Right.
That is something that there's a science to. It's not because I'm special. It's not because I'm different. I do think about things differently, but we've been able to put it into a framework that we can give to other people so that they can start to see this if they're willing. And I think this ties into the whole conversation and the whole reason behind your podcast. You have to be willing to do the simple things that don't seem like they're making any difference for long enough to see them make a difference.
Yeah.
When you actually have community in the way that I guess I think about community, when that is present, your whole way of doing business has a different energy, a different momentum to it, because it's not just coming from you. When you're showing up and you're selling something, you're promoting something, the squad is like, okay, what are we promoting? What do you need? How do I help spread the word? It's kind of probably how you feel launching this podcast.
Yeah.
Just all the support gathering behind it, and you have people who really stick. They stay around. They do business with you for years because they feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different way of approaching business. I think it's a very heart-centered way, but I've seen the result in our business. We've been able to, I don't know what internet marketing gurus say is like a great conversion rate, but we consistently blow all of those numbers out of the water because it's always been community first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited. How can people learn more about this container?
So probably the best way is we have just set up on our text mentorship list, which is one of my favorite places to connect with our podcast community. They can just text me the word community to the number 602-536-7829. And that'll just make sure that they get the link and all the details and that stuff. And, just plug into the Powerhouse Women community. If this conversation resonated with you, if the topic of this podcast resonated with you, there's a whole lot more of that. And, so many women who are on this journey with you. If you're listening to Aisha and I and going, I don't have that person yet, I guarantee there is someone who is just waiting to become your business bestie, life bestie within that community. And it's a really special place.
It is. It really is. I promise you. And I will make sure to put that in the show notes along with your Instagram. If there's anything else that you want to share in terms of where else people can find you, that would be perfect.
Well, I just want everyone to, okay, this is me now. I'm going to step into the role of supportive, stage friend. Is that a thing? A stage friend?
Yeah.
Listen, the way to support a new podcast is to go and subscribe, go and follow the show, go and write a review, give it 5 stars, nothing less. Write something really nice where it says, you see a link to say click and write a review, because that is the best way to get this message out to more people. And like I said, this is the podcast we've all been waiting for. So I'm so grateful that you launched it. I'm so grateful that I get to have you in my earbuds whenever I want.
Yeah. Well, I love you so much. Thank you for sharing this time with me. And I'm just grateful. I'm just having a moment, looking back at a year ago. So thank you.
Look at us.
Look at us. Our year ago selves would be so proud.
So proud. I love you.
Love you.